they were the greatest fighters. No, they were humans, and they still had PTSD back then. I just came right out and said, I have PTSD. Lots and lots of soldiers, sailors, Air Force, Marines have this. And too many people see it as something that you've got to hide, that you can't admit what's going on. So I wanted to spend one whole section trying to convince people, look, if you have PTSD, get help.
Yeah.
Here are things that can help you. But with the way people treat whistleblowers, if I have PTSD, someone's going to bring it out in a negative way. So I might as well beat them to the punch and just say, look.
Well, good for you. Well, that happened to David Grush. It's crazy, yes. But they basically leaked his medical records from the police department locally in Virginia. Leaked this call that he had because one of his friends was mortared right next to him. Another friend committed suicide due to his own PTSD. He was an Afghanistan combat veteran, and he had suffered from it. And he talks about it in this interview I do with him where he talks about doing, heart rate variability, breath work, and other things to really, reintegrate. So I admire your courage for talking about this. And I think you're right to say it prophylactically, because I can't tell you how many other whistleblowers I've broken who are, in my opinion, are sort of war heroes, things they tell me off air, really impressive things they've gone through. And then people just go after their core credentials. They don't even go after the experience. They go after their, they act like they weren't, like this one guy wasn't a Green Beret or something. It's like crazy. It's like, I know he was.
Well, you can have PTSD by survivor's remorse. There was one guy when I was a very young doctor who was in Vietnam, and they were in a firefight. And so they were trying to keep suppressive cover down. And he had emptied his M16, and so he put the next magazine in, and he was just hesitating because, man, they're taking fire from everywhere. Well, his sort of battle buddy guy was still firing next to him, and he paused instead of immediately returning fire. And while he paused, his best friend got hit and killed. And so for the rest of his life, he felt like if I had given suppression fire, my buddy wouldn't have died. And so I talked to him a number of times, but his family would say, "You're a hero," and people would say all this kind of stuff. And yet, in his mind, he wasn't a hero. His buddy died because he hesitated. He was the least thing of a hero in his own mind that it could be, because his buddy had died because he paused before returning fire. And that was something that guy was going to live with the rest of his life.
Yeah, I could see that eating away at you more than something having happened to you directly. So broadly, is the source of your PTSD just seeing all these people in the medical context, or is it?
Well, it's all kinds of things. Sort of the one thing that sort of stands out as a story was that we had an aircraft mishap where one of our pilots died. And so I had to go and collect urine samples from him, blood samples from him. I had to gather up the rest of his body and try to get as much of his body together as we could before we shipped it off for an autopsy. And so this was out in a field environment. And so I got back to my tent because a bunch of people saw what happened. So I had to counsel all of these other people. So I spent the whole afternoon counseling these people and doing my job as a flight surgeon to prepare for the aircraft mishap investigation that was going to come out of this, because every time an aircraft crashes, we try to find the details so that we can prevent the next one. So I finally got back to my GP medium, which is a general purpose tent. And as I sit down on my cot, one of my medics says, "Captain Rogers, how bad was it?" And I said, "As bad as you can imagine." I picked up parts of his body 130 yards away. And, so I was giving her just a few details, and all of a sudden she looked and she said, "Captain Rogers, I don't know how to tell you this, but it looks like part of his brain is on your boot."
Oh.
So I looked down and I said, "Oh, yeah, it is." So I picked up part of his brain, and we had a potbelly stove to keep us warm, and I just tossed it into that potbelly stove. For me, the very next moment, there was a hand on my shoulder, and it was my staff sergeant, who was my NCOIC, and he said, "Come on, Doc, we got to get some breakfast, head over to 3rd Attack." And I said, "What are you talking about? It's the middle of the night." He said, "No, it's 05:53. We need to get moving." And so he didn't realize what had happened to me. I didn't realize what had happened. But I got up and went and got some breakfast, went over to the 3rd Attack Battalion Aid Station and did all of the stuff I was supposed to do, because the man who died was from 3rd Attack. And so late that day, I finally saw my medic, and I said, "Hey, do you remember talking to me early this morning?" She said, oh, yeah. And I said, "Do you remember telling me that part of his brain was on my boot?" And she said, "Yes, sir." I said, and I took it and I put it in the potbelly stove. And she said, "Yes, sir." And I said, "What did I do then?" And she said, "Well, you just sat there. I tried to talk to you, but you weren't responding, so I just got back in my sleeping bag and went to sleep." I had lost more than 4 hours that I can't account for.
Jesus. You went into some sort of catatonic state or something.
Yeah, and needless to say, there have been times that I have relived these issues in my dreams.
Yeah.
And I've got lots of other stories.
Yeah.
But they're not all good stories.
Yeah.
And you can't undo a story like that.
Yeah.
This was one of my friends. I had done his flight physical 2 weeks before we went out there.
Damn.
And now I'm taking part of his brain and throwing it in a potbelly stove.
Yeah.
So tell me how that's going to get fixed. You can't fix that.
No, you can't. You can't do anything.
So I've got other stories like that I don't want to go into. But
I'm sorry, man. Well, we're all here for you. I really appreciate you, having the courage to come out and, like you said, you have David Grush's 6 o'clock position. I think it's very cool that you're doing this, and that you're being so open and sharing about your PTSD, which is in no way related to your testimony, which people should realize. If you were to blanket discount, people with PTSD, you'd be like discounting half the military.
Yeah. Well,
and the things
a lot
that they
of people
said.
don't realize it, but we have archaeological evidence that goes all the way back to the Spartans. And there was a doctor that had written a treatise back then, and that treatise fit every category of PTSD now. And so even the ancient Spartans, who we think of, they were the greatest fighters. No, they were humans, and they still had PTSD back then.
Different parts of the brain have different activities.